You have the Guru Vandanam, the prayer in your camp booklet. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutrabhashya Kritau Vande Punah Punah Ishvaro Gururatmedi Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavadvyaptadehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Gukarastvandhakaro vai Rukarastanivartakaha Andhakara nirodhitvad Gururitya vidhiyate. Sadashiva samarambham Charya madhyamam Asmadacharya paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Accepting oneself. That is the topic of discussion during these 3 days. Accepting oneself, accepting myself. And this topic may sound a bit strange. What do you mean accepting myself? Is there any question of not accepting myself? And also, whether this discussion of accepting myself, does it have any relevance in my day-to-day life? Does it make me a better person or a more successful person? Would it? Then only you would be interested in any discussion. It's natural, because we come here to Gurukulam to learn something and hoping that this learning or knowledge would make us more effective people in our life. It is natural to have that expectation, and in fact Vedanta is meant for that. Vedanta, upon which all our talks or discussions are based, is the most practical vision, what we call the vision or view of life, as well as the way of life. Vedanta presents before us a view of life or vision of life, and also teaches us the way of life. Vedanta is the most practical, for the simple reason that I am the subject matter of Vedanta. Vedanta talks about me, about I. and therefore it is most relevant to me. Coming to this topic of accepting oneself, accepting myself, this topic would be relevant only if there was non-acceptance of myself. If there was a non-acceptance, then alone acceptance would be a relevant thing to talk about. Is there a non-acceptance of myself? The answer is yes. Human being is a self-conscious being. That is the result of the evolution. That human being is the most evolved being in the whole universe. And as the Vedas say, the intelligence is most manifest in the human being. The consciousness, the self, the truth or Brahman is most manifest in human beings. It is manifest everywhere. In fact, what is manifestation of Brahman or truth or the self? But then, the manner in which it manifests depends upon the meaning of manifestation. Please do not read here, oh, listen. No? It manifests in tables and chairs also. What manifests is consciousness, is Brahman. But it simply manifests as existence. So table is, that's about all. Existence is most evident in what we call the inert or insentient objects. Then, in plants and trees, it also manifests as existence plus a certain amount of consciousness. In insects also, consciousness is manifest to some extent. And the manifestation of consciousness becomes more and more evident as we go to more evolved life forms, and it becomes the most evident in the human being. As the Vedas say, that the intelligent consciousness is manifest as intelligence, most manifest as intelligence in human beings. And therefore, a human being is conscious of himself. He is also conscious, of course, of the world around himself. And he has ambition. He has ambition of becoming immortal. Through this mortal body or body-mind complex that he has, he wants to become immortal. He can predict, he knows what happened yesterday. He can also predict what will happen tomorrow. So all these capacities are most evident in the human being. That is why human being is the most evolved creature. And thus, as we said, we are blessed with self-consciousness. Consciousness about my own self. Other creatures also have self-consciousness to some extent, not that they are totally devoid of that. Even dogs, cats, all of them are conscious to some extent because a dog knows another dog. Even a huge dog may know a little one also as dog and therefore treats it as a dog and knows a cat as a cat and perhaps will attack the cat. To that extent they seem to be conscious of what they are. But other than that, we do not find any self-consciousness. We use our self-conscious also with reference to our nature of always presenting ourselves as acceptable or presentable people, self-conscious. If you take a camera in your hand and tell me, Swamiji, let me take a picture of you, then you have to see my behavior. Immediately, I'm self-conscious. I make my upavastra properly and make sure, if I don't have hair, of course, but if I had, then I would make them properly. You see, in India, people often ride on two-wheeler scooters. So when they come and park the scooter in the ashram, then you have to watch many of them. In that mirror which is in the scooter, he looks at himself. Before coming to the class, even men also do this. So our clothes, our hairstyle, and what all various things we do, we say I'm self-conscious. Conscious of myself. Which is a great blessing as well as, you may say, a great problem or a great challenge. I should not say great curse, a great challenge. I am conscious of myself. I always know myself. And second thing we have is this intellect, whose nature it is to make a judgment, to have an opinion, to have a conclusion about things. Our intellect, whatever it comes in contact with, it always has an opinion. Even as you're walking along on the path in the Gurukulam and you see somebody else coming from the other direction, right away the mind will have an opinion. He is known or unknown, he is a friend or not a friend, he is a good person, beware. Some opinion. It is the nature of the intellect to have opinion about whatever it comes in contact with. Even though we are always told no, not be judgmental, but then it is the nature of intellect to judge, that's all. Adhyavasayatmika antahagana vrittihi buddhi. Or the intellect is defined like this. It is that mode of mind whose nature it is to come to a conclusion, to have decision, to have a judgment. And so the intellect is going to have an opinion about whatever it comes in contact with. And we are self-conscious. We are always conscious of ourselves. We do not have a choice in not being conscious of ourselves because the self is self-revealing. I have a choice of turning away from anything other than myself. I can close my eyes if I do not want to see something. I can close my ears if I don't want to hear something. This we hear, Even a child also does this. When father or mother says something, I don't want to hear. I don't want to see. We have a freedom to turn our mind away from anything that we want, from the world, from anything other than myself. I can turn my mind away, but I can never turn myself away from myself, because the self is self-revealing. See, other things in the world are not anything other than the self is not self-revealing, inasmuch as in order for something to reveal itself, it requires me. For the flower to become an object of my consciousness, my consciousness is required, then alone the flower can become the object of my consciousness. My mind is required, put it this way. When my mind comes in contact with the flower, then I become conscious of the flower. I have the freedom to turn my mind away from this flower, in which case I will not be conscious of it. The flower does not have freedom to impact my mind or my consciousness unless I allow my mind to come in contact with this object such as flower. And that is why we have the freedom to turn our mind, withdraw the mind from anything. However, the self is self-revealing, and therefore it always reveals itself whether I want or not. Therefore, self does not wait for me to be conscious because self is consciousness. See, understand the difference between a flower, an object such as a flower, and I or the self. So this flower, in Vedanta we call it jada or inert, inasmuch as it is not self-revealing. The flower can reveal itself only when, as I said, my mind comes in contact with the flower, then alone I become conscious of flower. There can be any number of things around, but if my mind does not come in contact, I don't become conscious of them. Somebody can be sitting in front of me and still if my mind is turned away somewhere, I may not be aware of that person. Somebody may be talking to me. Sometimes on the telephone also they keep talking, and your mind is somewhere else, suppose. So you are multitasking. So you have something in front of you also, you are reading or writing something and also on the phone, and so a lot of things you miss. You don't care to listen to everything perhaps, So if your mind is turned away, then you are not conscious of that thing because those words do not have the capacity to reveal themselves unless I put my mind to them. No object in the world has capacity to impact me or to reveal itself unless I put my mind behind that. But how about the self? The mind is always in contact with the self because self is self-revealing. Atma or I is self-revealing, self-shining. That being the case, I do not have freedom not to be conscious of myself. See the difference? I have the freedom not to be conscious of anything if I choose, and I have the capacity to do that. But I have no freedom not to be conscious of myself. And therefore, the intellect, whose nature it is to make a judgment, will naturally make a judgment about myself also. And so the intellect comes in contact with the self always, is aware of the self always, and therefore the intellect has an opinion or judgment about the self. Next question is, what is the nature of self that I am conscious of? What do I generally find myself to be? I generally find myself to be a limited self or a limited being. This is my opinion about myself. This is my opinion about myself, understand? My opinion need not always be in keeping with the reality, understand? I have an opinion about you also which may be quite different from what you really are. Because it's the nature of the mind of opinion, and sometimes because of its own insecurities, likes and dislikes, it projects something which may not be there, and therefore I may have opinion about things which is quite different from the reality of the things. And similarly, I have an opinion about myself which may not necessarily be in keeping with the reality of myself. I have a perception about myself. And what is my perception? What is my opinion? That I am a limited being. I am limited in time, limited in place, and limited in my attributes, limited in my abilities, capacities. This is the general opinion that I have about myself, which is all right. I am limited, Meaning I know that I was born at a given time, and I know that I am growing in age, and I know that someday I am going to die. And so I am conscious about that. So I know that I am limited in time. I am limited in place. I know that I can be in one place at one time and not at another place, although very often I wish that was the case. I wish I was in more than one place at a given time. Because often there are conflicting demands upon me, and this person also wants me to be there, other person also may want me to be there, and I cannot, I have to disappoint somebody. Or very often, I wish that I was with somebody and still by myself. But again, I am limited. I can be at only one place at one time. Limitation in place, limitation in capacities, limitation in power. Ishvara has blessed us with different powers. We have these threefold powers. The power to know, the power to will, and power to act. Power to know, called Jnana Shakti, that I have been given an intellect with which to know, I have capacity to know. Power to will, I have a mind with which I can will and I can create. Power to act, I have been given the vitality as well as the organs of action with which to perform actions. So these powers are given to us, the Jnana Shakti, Ichha Shakti, Kriya Shakti, power to know, power to will, power to act. It's a wonderful gift. However, each of these powers is limited, and I am conscious about it. That I am limited in the power to act, power to know, power to will. So limited in power, limited in time, limited in place, I am conscious of the fact that I am limited in every way. Now this also is okay. Being conscious of being limited is no problem. Where is the problem? I cannot accept this fact that I am a limited being. This is a problem. That I am limited is not a problem. What's the problem? Problem is that I cannot accept myself being a limited being. I have expectations of my own self. You see, we are all very demanding people. We have demands or expectations of everything and everybody around us. A husband has expectation of the wife, wife has expectation of husband. Parents have expectation of children, children have expectation of parents. I have expectation from my friends, friends have expectation of me. In every relationship, an expectation is always built in. In every relationship, at every moment, there is always some expectation of the other. Whenever I come in contact with anybody, immediately in my mind, there is an expectation from the person with whom I come in contact with. But more than that, this mind whose nature it is to have an expectation also has expectation of its own self, that I have an expectation of myself. What is my expectation of myself? What do I expect from myself? That I must be a perfect person. I must be a complete person. I must be free from every limitation. This is the expectation I have of myself. So make a note of this. How do I find myself? I find myself a limited being, limited in time, place and capacities, which would not have been a problem except that I have an expectation of myself that I should be free from every limitation. There is this big contradiction in our life, or big problem in our life, that as a human being, I am a self-conscious being, always conscious of myself, and conscious of myself who is a limited self, At the same time, I have an expectation of myself and that I want to be complete or free or perfect. This is an expectation I have of myself. There is no exception to this. Even the smallest one also expects himself or herself to be a complete being, perfect being, always right, always successful. I expect myself always successful. I expect myself to be always right. I expect myself to be always perfect or complete. And when I find that I am not always right, I am not always successful, I am not always complete, I am not always limitless, I feel a sense of inadequacy. I feel inadequate. The sense of inadequacy arising from this great gulf or distance between what I expect of myself and what I find myself to be. There is an ideal I and there is an actual I. The ideal I, which I want to be, which I expect myself to be, that is, it should be complete. It should be free from every limitation. The actual I is, it is incomplete, it is limited, and that gives rise in my mind a sense of inadequacy. I am not adequate. I find that I am not able to measure up to my own expectation of myself. And that creates in me a sense of frustration, a sense of disappointment or unhappiness with my own self. So more often than not, I am usually unhappy with my own self. This current of unhappiness with myself is always running. And in most cases, it really controls all my activities or controls my life. And so, in whatever I do, there is this current of dissatisfaction with my own self. This you have to make a note of. In case you have never thought in this way, when you next time you have some time, look at your mind and look at the various thoughts which arise in the mind, make a note of them. And what will you find? I'm sure you will find this. What will you find? You'll find that every thought about myself reflects some kind of dissatisfaction about myself. Even when I am successful, then also I am satisfied for a moment and immediately then my mind wants some more success. That is why we find that we are rarely satisfied with what, even with our accomplishments, even though we may be a very accomplished person, and we, all of us are, and still there is no satisfaction with what I am, there is no satisfaction with what is. Because I want everything to be complete, I want everything to be perfect, I want no sense of limitation at all. This is my expectation. No, this is something I can never meet with. And this expectation drives me all the time. What's the driving force? What's the driving force that makes me do things one after the other? What's the driving force which makes me achieve one thing after the other and which drives me is this sense of dissatisfaction with my own self. This is what we call self-dissatisfaction or self-non-acceptance. And that is why this topic of self-acceptance becomes very relevant, because there is constantly a self-non-acceptance in our life arising from a self-dissatisfaction. Why am I dissatisfied with myself? Because I do not measure up to my own expectation of myself. Because I have a natural expectation of myself. Again, it is the nature of mind to have expectation. They tell us, give up all expectations. That itself becomes an expectation, but still, this is an advice that makes us very frustrated. So how to give up expectation? It is nature of mind to have expectation. As I said, in every relationship, in every encounter, some expectation is generally involved. And more than anything else, I have expectation of myself. And I do not measure up to my own expectation of myself, which creates in me a sense of inadequacy. I feel inadequate. It is a sense of inadequacy which really makes me dissatisfied or unhappy with myself. Usually, I am unhappy with my own self. If you look at the reason for unhappiness in general, if you look at the complaints we have of others, we will find that all the complaints originate from the complaints that I have about my own self. I'm a very complaining fellow. We tell some, we talk about it's always complaining, always complaining. And here I find in this country particularly, people preface the statements, Swami, I'm not complaining. And then say whatever they want to say. It's not a complaint. So there is another complex that we should not complain. I don't know what kind of, so this is what we are told, you should not complain. So I'm not complaining. Because we are told you should not judge. So I'm not judging. I'm not complaining. But that's exactly what we do. Because that is the nature of the mind. But the complaints I have about others, they originate from the complaints that I have about myself. This is very important. We have to pay attention to ourselves. That is what Vedanta wants us to do. Vedanta wants us to pay attention to our own self. We are so busy paying attention to everything else. As we say, we are so busy keeping appointments with everybody else that we have no opportunity to have an appointment with ourselves. We are so busy analyzing and understanding everything else, whether it is politics, whatever it is, always analyzing everything else, except that I do not seem to have any time to analyze myself. And that's what Vedanta wants us to do. Sometimes, therefore, Vedanta is rather inconvenient. It throws ourselves to our own lap, and in fact, not requires, but tells us that how we can resolve our own problems. I wish, Swami, somebody else solves my problems. That's the comfort that we get very often when we go to other places where people say, don't worry, beta. He puts your hand on your head, so all your problems will be solved. When somebody tells me, I feel very comfortable. Unfortunately, Vedanta doesn't say that. Vedanta does not say that somebody else will solve your problems, or even God will solve your problems. God can, but then that you have to solve the problems. And God will help you to solve your problems. See, the way our Swamiji interprets the statements in Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says that out of compassion for my devotees, I reveal myself to them, I dispel the darkness of ignorance in their heart and light the lamp of knowledge. So Ishvara, or God Himself, lights the lamp of knowledge. So how does a Vedantic teacher explain this statement? Says that the only way that the lamp of knowledge can be lit is when knowledge takes place in you. The only way that can happen is when you have the teaching of Vedanta, and only when you have a teacher. And so the way that even Ishvara also can light the lamp of knowledge is by becoming a teacher, coming to you as teacher, and ultimately helping you to dispel that ignorance. Says Upanishad, Yame Vaisha Vrunate Tena Labhya. The one who chooses the self, by that the self is attained. And therefore, there is something that we have to do. No doubt that grace is available to us, help is available to us. There is a great comfort that help is available, grace is available. At the same time, we have to do something. Says Bhagavad Gita, Uddhared Atmana Atmanam. Uddhared Atmana Atmanam, meaning that may you lift yourself by yourself. Natmanam avasadayet. You should not allow the self to, you should not allow to degrade the self, should not allow the self to slip in devolution. You should lift yourself up by yourself. Thus, this is a responsibility that Vedanta accepts us to assume. Because Ishvara has given us this intellect and expects us to have responsibility. When Lord Krishna says, Karmanyevadhikaraste, you have the freedom to perform the action, meaning that you have to take the responsibility for what you do. Our Swami says this law of karma is a law of cause and effect. You see, the world blames very often, the Westerners blame India. They say that the reason why India is what is, it is poor and whatever problems India has, are all due to their philosophy. And what's the reason? This karma. This law of karma is the reason why Indians are what they are now, whatever the reason of this judgment. Says, no, it's just the other way around. It is because of karma that Indians are surviving, really. Swamiji says, this karma is a great shock absorber. Because whenever anything unpleasant happens to us, when anything painful happens to us, you know what we say? It is my karma. This is very important. Even when you say it is my karma, you know what it means? It means that I do not blame anybody else. And what is meant by my karma is that I must have done something in the past. Swami, I don't see anything that I have done in this life, well, in the past life. The answers are all ready. Because we accept the continuity of life. We do not say that our existence began only with this birth. Existence never comes to an end. It is called existence whose nature is to exist. So existence can never come to an end. Nothing can ever bring an end to existence because something that wants to bring an end to existence exists because of existence, As Lord Krishna says, Nainam chindanti shastrani. The weapons cannot cleave the self, just as a sword cannot cut itself, A sword cannot cut itself because a sword is what it is because of itself. So there is continuity of existence. That's what is the reality, that's what we accept, and therefore we say that existence never comes to an end. There is no break in existence, therefore I existed, always existed. Lord Krishna says, Natvivaham jatunasam natvam neme janadhipaha. Here Arjuna, there never was a time when I was not. There never was a time when you were not. There never was a time when all these people were not, meaning that I, you, and all of these always were. Nachayavana bhavishyamaha, there never will be a time when we will not be. We always were and we always will be. Meaning that birth is not the beginning of existence and death is not the end of existence. Birth is merely the beginning of existence in a given embodiment, and death is the end of existence in a given embodiment. Just as there is this bangle. So bangle was made at a given time and bangle may be melted at a given time. So when the bangle was made at a given time, it is not that the existence was created. Bangle always existed as gold and the existence began in a given form. So when the bangle will be melted, it is not that the existence will come to an end. Existence in a given form will come to an end. It will assume a new form. And so also the life does not have a beginning. It has beginning in a given embodiment. It will come to an end in a given embodiment. But then life always continues. It's a very simple principle. And therefore, so yesterday there was a question, Swamiji, Are we all created equal? Because that's what he said. Man is created equal. Answer is nobody is equal. Everybody is unique. Everybody is different. In one sense we are all equal, in another sense we are all different. Because each one of us is a product of what we have done in the past. The present is the product of the past. Therefore, even today also, whenever I perform any action, understand that I am myself creating a future for myself. I am creating a destiny for myself. Even though I have no freedom to change the destiny which I have right now, at the same time, I have the freedom to create a new destiny for myself. This is what law of karma tells us. In short, law of karma means taking responsibility for what I do. Because I am accountable for what I do, whatever I am right now and whatever happens to me in the present is the result of what I must have done in the past. Swamiji, what did I do? When did I do this? I don't know. These questions often arise when particularly something painful or unpleasant happens. Then the question arises, why? Why should it happen? It's a natural question because we don't want the painful, unpleasant to happen. When you ask the question why, there is in fact a tendency to not accept that reality, whatever. But the answer is there must be a reason. We'll come to that, but here what I am trying to say is that this karma is not the reason why India is poor or whatever the problems are. In fact, karma is the reason why India survives. It's a great shock absorber because whenever anything inexplicable happens, anything painful happens, we always at least say that this is my karma. Unfortunately, we go to other people and say that to them also. So when somebody is sick in the hospital, these relatives or friends go to him, it is your karma, which is not the way to say. Better not say that, because that person is not ready right now to listen to that. But the fact is, that is a fact. But fact is not always to be stated. So I always tell the truth. Not necessary. That doesn't mean you should tell a lie. You need not say anything, that's all. I'm not saying that you should tell a lie. But it's not necessary you're obliged to tell truth all the time. Satyam bruyat, priyam bruyat, na bruyat, satyam apriyam. Says Manusmriti that you speak truth, but speak in a pleasant way. You find that the truth is not pleasant, then you need not speak the truth. However, pleasant or unpleasant, this is a reality that what is the present is a product of the past karma, and this becomes a great shock absorber in as much as we become free from blaming. It happened because of you. That's what somebody in the West will say. What will the Indian say? Says it is because of karma. Whose karma? My karma. My prarabdha. So, when you're stuck with something, this is my spouse, my karma. My child, my karma. This is my boss, my karma. That gives a great relief. Because then you don't blame anybody. And we need not blame ourselves also. When we blame karma, karma is the third party. So I need not blame myself also, nor blame anybody else. This is excellent. It becomes a great therapy, and so it is true also. Not that this is not true, it is right. So that is fine. That is, I said, a shock absorber, that is good. But still, this undercurrent of a general dissatisfaction always remains. Dissatisfaction in the world around me, which originates from dissatisfaction with myself. As we said, whatever complaints we have about others originate from the complaints that I have about myself. Whatever violence we see around all originates from the violence within myself. This is a basic violence. What's the basic violence? That I do not accept myself, that I am not satisfied with myself, that I even dislike myself, sometimes I even reject myself. All our unhappiness can be traced to this one simple cause, and that is dissatisfaction with myself. Only one cause. What makes me unhappy? Who is the cause of my unhappiness? I am the cause of my unhappiness. And then what can become the cause of my happiness? I can become the cause of my happiness also. To repeat Swamiji's famous statement, I am the problem and I am the solution. I am the problem. Which I is the problem? The I with which I am not satisfied is a problem. And thus, human being has a problem. This is called the fundamental problem. Each one of us is equal in this sense that each one of us has a perception about the self is limited, and therefore a non-acceptance of limited self, a non-acceptance of myself, a dissatisfaction with myself, and therefore an impulse to do something so that I somehow become acceptable to myself. So all the desires which arise in my mind can be traced to this one desire, and that is the desire to become acceptable to myself. That's all I want. Human being does not want anything. So recently a couple came to me, seeing me, and telling me their problems and things like that, and husband talking about wife and wife talking about husband, and they will talk in all philosophical terms. Swamiji doesn't know what to do with this time, and he does only this, and always with the internet and this, that, and so forth, or watching TV, etc. Husband said, that's what I like to do, what can I do? Wife said, I always like to be social, I want to be with people, etc., etc. After listening to all this lecture for half an hour, I simply told the husband that your wife simply wants you. You are not available to her. You are with your internet, you are with your TV, you are with whatever you are with, and therefore you are not available to her. She wants you. She smiled. She said, Swamiji, you are right. She also did not realize this, perhaps, But there was a great relief. You are right, Swamiji. That's true. I am right because I know the basic principles. Sometimes people wonder, how do you know, Swamiji? If you know Vedanta, the basic principles, then you know because everybody is that way same. The minds work in the same way, in a very similar way. Thus, everybody wants to be acceptable. Then, if I do not accept myself, the next thing is, I want to be acceptable to you. And therefore, this is a big thing. Always trying to be acceptable to others, always trying to get approval of others. This is the activity going on from me. So, basic desire is to be acceptable to myself, to be happy with myself. And the only cause of my unhappiness is that I am not happy with myself. Even though I may complain about many things and say I am not happy with my children, not happy with my boss, not happy with my income, not happy with my house, not happy with my car, not happy with various other things, we are not happy with anything actually. Everything gives you happiness for a while, and later on, even the car also is beautiful, but after 6 months, 9 months, then you start finding some, you have complaints about anything. It's the best furniture, it's the best thing, whatever it is. The best thing you buy, Swamiji, we had so much money, and then this is what we got, but whatever. But therefore, dissatisfaction, other things, all spring from dissatisfaction with myself. Complain about other things, all spring from complain about myself. Problems I have with others, all spring from problem that I have with myself. Therefore, at the moment, I am the problem to myself because I do not accept myself. I am not satisfied with myself. I am not happy with myself. And all my activities, this gives rise to desire. What's the desire? I want to be happy with myself. That's the only desire I have. As our Swamiji says, all we want is a pleased self. Quoting the statement from Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which is part of the dialogue between Sri Yajnavalkya and his wife Maitreyi. a very famous story where once upon a time Yajnavalkya calls his wife Maitreyi and says, "Hey Maitreyi, now I'm going to walk away from here. I'm going to walk away from this householder life and take to the life of a renunciate, a wandering monk. That's what I'm going to become. And you need not worry in my absence because I made enough provision for you as well as with other wife. Katyayani, for both of you I made enough provision. I've divided all the property. So from now on you need not worry about each other also. You're not more connected also. So far you are connected because of me, that connection also need not be there." All reassurance is given. Then Maitreyi asks him a simple question that, "Oh sir, if the whole earth full of riches was given to me, not only money or wealth that you are leaving for me, if the whole earth full of riches was given to me, will that make me immortal?" Yajnavalkya says, "No, I'm sorry, my dear. All the wealth also cannot make you immortal. Amrutatvasya nashasti vittena iti." That with all the wealth or with any other material accomplishment, one cannot become immortal. Nothing can give you immortality. Then what will I do with this wealth? Well, you can live a comfortable life. Not a happiness cannot come from this wealth, comfort can come from the wealth. Immortality cannot come from the wealth, comfort can come. Although we equate comfort and happiness, therefore we are always accumulating things or acquiring things which actually are meant to make us more comfortable, but we assume that they will make us more happy. But Yajnavalkya says, no, that's not the equation. Comfort is not equal to happiness. Wealth can make you comfortable. So right away Maitreyi says, okay, what is the use of that wealth that does not make me happy? What's the use of wealth that does not make immortal means doesn't make me happy? What do I have to do with this wealth? But the fact that you are leaving this place, leaving all the wealth and you are walking away from here shows that you have something, that you are happy without the wealth also. You would not walk away from here. That's an interesting thing, isn't it? That he leaves all the wealth for his wife and he walks away without the wealth. So this is very, very intelligent lady. The other woman did not ask any question. Katyayani was quite all right. It's okay, leaving wealth for me, that's good. Maitreyi was very sharp. You are walking away with this wealth you're leaving, which means you don't need it, which means that you are happy without that also. Please teach me that by which you have that happiness or immortality. And that's how the dialogue between Sri Yajnavalkya and his wife Maitreyi begins. A very famous dialogue in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which occupies a whole section. But in that Yajnavalkya makes this very famous statement. Hey Maitreyi, whatever is dear in our life is dear not for that sake, but for the sake of the self. Navare patyuh kamaya patih priyo bhavati atmastu kamaya patih priyo bhavati. Hey Maitreyi, it is not for the sake of husband, that husband is dear to the wife, it is for the sake of the self, that even husband also is dear to wife. Oh, that means the wives are always self-centered, husbands are not. No. Navare jayai kamaya jaya priya bhavati atmanastu kamaya jaya priya bhavati. A wife is dear to husband, not for the sake of wife, for the sake of the self. And then there is a long list given. Even children also, son also is dear, not for the sake of son, for the sake of the self. Wealth is dear, not for the sake of wealth, for the sake of self. Even heaven is dear, not for the sake of heaven, for the sake of self. Anything is dear, not for the sake of that, for the sake of the self. Meaning that we are always, in every transaction, in every interaction, there's only one thing we are seeking, and that is what? Satisfaction for the self. We are always seeking to be a pleased self, meaning an acceptable self. When can I be pleased with myself? Only when I find myself acceptable in my own perception. Meaning that either my perception about me changes, or I change myself to become acceptable in my perception, but then whenever that happens, that is when I am happy. I'm happy when I'm acceptable to myself in my own perception. That is when I become a pleased self, and that is all that I want in life. As I told that couple, all she wants is you, because then alone she is pleased. Then she feels that she is safe, she is secure, she is acceptable, she is good, she is all right. You always turn away from her. That makes us feel that she is no good. You don't care for her, meaning she is not worth caring for. She doesn't feel worthy of herself because she doesn't attract your attention, whatever. But thus, we are all seeking to be acceptable to ourselves. When I am acceptable to myself, I am pleased with myself. And thus, we are all seeking to be a pleased self. And therefore, accepting oneself is what? Acceptance, self-acceptance will make me a pleased self. And that is all that we want in life. All we want. Nobody wants wealth for the sake of the wealth. Nobody wants name and fame for the sake of name and fame. Nobody wants anything for the sake of that, even heaven, whatever be the most covetable object in the world, nobody wants it for its own sake. Everybody wants that for the sake of themselves. Which self? The pleased self. I want things because I hope that by attaining or acquiring them, I'll become a pleased self. That is why I want them. It's a different thing whether they are able to do that or not. It is quite possible that when my desire is fulfilled, I become a displeased self also. It is quite possible. Because this fellow is chasing a woman, it's a very beautiful woman. This is in the West, in New York City perhaps, and this young man saw this woman and he was attracted towards her. And he started following her. And then somehow she discovered, this man is following me. And so she went this way, that way, and then he also every way. So then she knew that this fellow is after me. And so she went to a coffee shop and he also followed. She sat down at a table, he also sat down at the same table. She ordered coffee, he also ordered coffee. And, started conversation, etc. And made it very clear how, he finds her to be very attractive. This woman was very kind. She says, you are very attracted to me, is it not? He says, yes. His desire is satisfied, that he wanted, to be with her. But then, she started revealing herself one by one. She removed her wig, and then discovered her hair was, not most attractive. She took out her denture, She took out one thing after the other. Then the real person was evident. Then this person realized what it is that he was chasing, what it is. So that's what we find sometimes. What we are chasing turns out to be hollow. Only when we get it. Until then we think that it is most attractive. And then when we get that, then we'll be very happy. But as I said, there's only one desire in us, and that is desire to be the pleased self. Desire to be acceptable to ourselves. And therefore, self-acceptance is the most important thing, is the only important thing to us. You may call ourselves a self-centered or whatever you call that, but that's what we are. All we want is happiness for ourselves. All we want is a pleasure for ourselves. And everything else is only used, we are all using things. We are only exploiting things. That's what we're including God also. Even when you go to Tirupati and make a gift there, that also is with a desire that Tirupati should bless you with a son, with job, with promotion, whatever it is. And so we are always using everything for our own sake. What's the sake? For the sake of the pleased self. And that happens when there is an acceptability of myself. That is why accepting oneself is extremely important, is the only thing that is important. And Vedanta teaches us how to do that. And that is why Vedanta becomes very important, very relevant, very practical to us. We'll continue our discussion in the next class. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। हरिः ॐ। श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः। हरिः ॐ।